Like most men, I will never understand women's fascination with shoes. My wife, for example, will insist to anyone who will listen that she hardly ever shops for shoes. However, when I last looked in her closet, there were probably 30 pairs of shoes, and I don't believe that any of them have been in the closet for more than 2 years. That's 30 pairs bought in the last 2 years, which probably replaced 30 pairs bought in the previous 2 years. For comparison, I have 1 pair of black shoes, 1 pair of brown shoes, 1 pair of boots, and 1 pair of sneakers. I've had the brown shoes and boots for about 3 years. It was one of those 30 pairs, a fairly inexpensive pair of Jimmy Choo shoes that cost only about $800, that marked the beginning of the end of my 22-year marriage. As I was told earlier, my wife, Stacy, was getting out of an elevator at one of her favorite clothing stores when the heel of one of her shoes got stuck in a small gap between the elevator and the floor and broke off, causing her to fall to the floor and hit her head, knocking her unconscious for several hours due to a concussion. When I arrived at the emergency room about 15 minutes after Stacy called one of her friends who was shopping with her, my wife was lying unconscious on a bed, hooked up to several tubes from an IV, and a doctor and nurse were examining her. I stood quietly at the door and watched them work for a few minutes until they noticed me. They both grimaced, which I took as a bad sign, although the only visible problem was a bandage on her forehead near her hairline. Doctor, what am I missing? I see a small bandage, an unconscious wife, and 2 frowning medical professionals, I asked nervously. The doctor looked down, then looked the nurse in the eye before turning to me. He cleared his throat. The good news is that she should wake up any minute now. She hit her head and stomach pretty hard. The bad news, however, is that she lost the baby. What baby? I asked in a voice that was several octaves higher than my usual bass. I had a vasectomy 17 years ago, after the birth of our second child. Both the doctor and the nurse stared at me in utter shock. Neither of them had a good expression on their faces. "Oh," the doctor muttered, and the nurse nodded in agreement. We're sorry, Mr. Blackburn." I stood there silently for a few seconds before quietly replying, "Yes, I am too." The doctor explained that while my wife was unconscious, they had run several tests, including a blood test, which showed that she was pregnant. I staggered over to the only chair in the room, which was several feet away from the bed so as not to interfere with the doctors and nurses. I don't know how long I sat there watching several people come in and out of the room. I knew I had to call the children and tell them what had happened, but I was so stunned that I couldn't move. After a while, I saw Stacy's eyelids flutter and finally open. "Welcome, Mrs. Blackburn," the doctor said calmly. "You are at Methodist Hospital in the emergency room. You fell badly and suffered a concussion. You were unconscious for some time." "My child? How is my child?" she asked, barely audibly. "The baby didn't survive. I'm very sorry," he said quietly, and Stacy burst into tears. At that moment, I got up from my chair. Stacy noticed my movement, looked at me, her eyes widened, and her mouth opened wide. I didn't say a word, and silently left the room. I spent the next half hour driving, telling the children about the accident with Stacy and that she had lost her baby. "Her what?" "What did you just say, Dad?" Our son Rob practically shouted over the conference call. "I thought you said—" "I had a vasectomy, Robbie. Obviously, it's not my child," I growled. "So, she was having an affair." "With whom?" Our daughter Lainey shouted. "How the hell should I know?" I yelled back. "Obviously, I had no idea she was having an affair, otherwise I would have divorced her already." There was silence on the line as both children digested what I had just said. "Are you saying there's no chance of reconciliation?" Lainey asked. This time I was the one who was silent for a while. "I have no idea how long this affair lasted or how many men she slept with. But getting pregnant when I had a vasectomy is incredibly stupid and disrespectful. She knew it was irreversible and that there was no way I was going to raise someone else's child. The doctor said the baby is about 3 months old, which means she could show up any day. So I just believe she waited until the last minute to tell me. Something's wrong. I mean, besides the pregnancy, but I don't know what yet. Nevertheless, I'm not going to hang around here and be a willing cuckold. She's history. In the future, she may become someone else's problem. That's cruel, Dad, but I believe we understand, Rob said. 30 minutes after I got home, I did all the mundane financial stuff necessary for a divorce and called my friend Quincy LeGrand, a damn good lawyer, even if he couldn't shoot a free throw to save his life when we played basketball together at the local YMCA. He agreed to meet me at his office at 7 a.m., technically before his workday started, the next day, if I agreed to stop teasing him about his inability to shoot a ball. It seemed like a fair deal to me. After taking care of everything I needed to do, I made myself a salad, sat down at the kitchen table, and tried to process what I had learned earlier that day. My first reaction was shock. I had no idea that my wife, my best friend and soulmate, could betray me so completely and ruthlessly and act as if nothing had changed in her life. Since I earned a very good living, Stacy didn't work, but she was involved in several volunteer committees in the city, so she had time for affairs if she wanted to. Either I was a complete idiot, or she was a very convincing actress, because I never believed she could cheat on me. Damn, I didn't see that coming. We always had a great relationship, both emotionally and sexually. Yes, we didn't have sex every day anymore, but we still made love 2 or 3 times a week, and I know for a fact that she still responded well to my caresses. So what the hell happened? The next morning, Quincy assured me that the divorce could be finalized in 6 months if my wife didn't fight it. Considering she had been cheating on me, I couldn't understand why she would fight it. I had barely finished my conversation with Quincy when my father-in-law called. I was close to my in-laws because my parents had died in a car accident when I was 30, and Stacy's parents had stepped into my life to fill the void as best they could. "How are you holding up, Matt?" my father-in-law asked. "I imagine today has been a shock for you." "You have no idea, Dad, and I hope you never do," I replied. I never believed that Stacy could do something so disgusting to me. If she cared about me at all, she could have at least asked for a divorce before cheating on me with whoever it was, like a common whore. "Careful, Matt. She's still my daughter," John Olson warned. "Even if she did something bad, she's still my daughter." "I understand, Dad, but even if she is your daughter, you can't say that what she did wasn't incredibly low. What would you have done if Mom had done that to you?" I asked. I heard him hold his breath. He was probably hoping I wouldn't ask him a question he would have to answer honestly. "I would probably kick her out as far away from me as I could, but I hope you'll be a better person than me and try to make peace with her," he said. "Since you've been honest with me, Dad, I'll be honest with you. Right now, I don't want to see that cheater anymore. I didn't do anything to deserve that kind of disrespect from her. Hell, I don't even know if I'm the only bastard she's been sleeping with. Excuse my French, Dad." Everything was going well, at least I believed that until today. And then I found out she had been cheating on me, smiling in my face every day for the last few months. I have no idea how long it's been going on, but it was probably not a one-time fling. "Yes," he whispered. "I believe you're right. It wasn't a one-time fling. I don't know what to say to you. I'm incredibly disappointed in her. I think if everything is okay, she'll be discharged the day after tomorrow. They want to keep her in for a little longer because she suffered a concussion and was unconscious for several hours. If you want, Mom and I can pick her up from the hospital and take her to your place. Only if you promise not to hurt her physically. Psychologically, that's up to you, I guess. I can't in good conscience say she doesn't deserve it." I promised my father-in-law that I wouldn't hurt his daughter. When I came home from work 2 days later, she was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. "Well, the whore is back. Did you have a nice rest?" I asked, sarcasm dripping from every word. "How could you do this to me? I lost my baby, you bastard!" she yelled at me. "Exactly. Your baby, not mine and yours. Why the hell should I care about your baby? What the hell did you believe?" I replied, trying to contain my anger and keep the promise I made to my father-in-law. I didn't want it to turn out this way. But when it did, I didn't feel guilty. I felt excited, powerful, like I had an advantage over you. "I've been fucking you over for the last 6 months. Ha! Fucking you over! Owning you! You were my cuckold, bitch! I'm sure I could have manipulated you into raising someone else's child if I hadn't stumbled that day," she said. "I was a good wife to you for over 20 years. It gave me a sense of power." The longer she talked, the more nauseous I felt. I was second. I threw up right there. But luckily, nothing came out. "Who the hell are you? What did you do to the Stacy I married?" I asked, genuinely shocked by this woman's behavior, not to mention the fact that I was nauseous. "I never treated you as anything other than an equal partner in this marriage. Where does this bitterness come from?" "Did you really treat me as an equal, Matt? Did you sacrifice your career to raise our children?" "I don't believe that," she said heatedly. Now it was my turn to be angry. "We talked about this before the wedding. My career was more lucrative, and you could stay home. You always said you liked being able to come and go as you pleased, not being tied to a desk, so to speak," I said. She sat there looking smug. I don't believe she understood how I struggled with my principle of never raising my hand to a woman. Then I realized that my wife was an actress with tremendous talent. She hadn't loved me for a long time. "So who's the new lover? Who replaced me in your heart?" I asked, trying not to show my pain. "Derek. You know Derek from next door," she replied, and her smug smile grew even wider, and it felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Dr. Derek Strong was a professor of anthropology at our local university. He was one of those people who believed that a PhD made them the smartest person in the room, regardless of what the topic was or who else was there. He was only 32, 15 years younger than my wife and me, and, I have to admit, he was damn good-looking. Light brown curly hair, blue eyes, and a perpetual stubble. He was one of the brightest stars at the university and, despite his relative youth, was highly respected. "Derek convinced me that you were just a shallow, self-centered man who thought I was nothing more than his property. So I decided to make you my cuckold to get back at you and put you in your place. And you were so sure of your mistaken superiority that you didn't even notice. I didn't notice because I trusted you completely. I loved you, you crazy bitch. It was a mistake I won't make again," I croaked. "Not surprising, but the divorce papers will arrive in the next day or two. There will be no dispute if I get half of our property and alimony for a few years. You can keep the house or sell it right away, again, provided that I get my half. I'll just move my things to Derek's," she said confidently. "Lainey is going to college next year. Until then, you can live in the house if you don't mind the neighbors finding out that Derek set you up. Then you can sell the house and we'll split the proceeds." She got up from the couch and went to our former bedroom to pack her things. I was shocked that she seemed to have all the answers, or at least the ones Derek had given her. It seemed to me that she was under his strong influence. I was completely erased from her life. I don't know how many neighbors knew about Stacy's affair with Derek, but over the next few weeks, many of them looked at me with sympathy. A couple of the more daring ones, who apparently weren't privy to the neighborhood gossip, even asked me what was going on, since Stacy was now frequently seen at Derek's house. Several men in our neighborhood expressed condolences, I guess, about the situation, and contempt for Derek. I don't understand why Stacy was surprised when she tried to enter the house that was now mine, and found that her key hadn't worked for 2 weeks after she moved in with Derek. I got a call at work and was berated for not letting her get her things out of my house. On the wise advice of my attorney, I have changed all the locks and the garage code. Since you abandoned this house and no longer live here, You have no right to enter my home whenever you feel like it. You can pick up whatever belongs to you when I get home from work, and not a minute sooner. And before you ask, Lainey has no right to let you in, and you shouldn't provoke her, considering how she feels about you right now," I said. When our divorce was finalized 6 months later, Stacy was clearly pregnant again. Lainey was furious with her mother because her classmates wouldn't leave her alone, calling Stacy a pregnant slut. "Damn it, Dad," Lainey complained one evening at dinner. "Couldn't she have waited until I was gone to get pregnant? I don't need a little brother or sister. All anyone will talk about is whether she'll pull out her boobs and feed the baby at the prom." I didn't answer my daughter because I wasn't sure if Stacy would do it or not, since I no longer had the slightest idea what was going on in the mind of my formerly demure wife. "One thing I can tell you for sure, I'm not babysitting that little brat," Leanne growled. Lainey's relationship with Stacy warmed up a bit as my ex-wife's pregnancy progressed, and she was even invited to a baby shower thrown for Stacy by a neighbor. My daughter practically apologized to me when she said she was going because she felt like she was betraying me, but I told her not to worry because Stacy was still her mother and they needed to maintain a relationship. "I suppose you're not even going to buy a gift for the baby when it's born?" Lainey asked me a few weeks before Stacy's due date. "No way," I replied emphatically. Rob was less optimistic than his sister about his mother's actions and her pregnancy. He was a sophomore in college and didn't even come home when Stacy gave birth. When he came home for his sister's graduation, he stayed with me and didn't go over to the neighbors to see his mother and his new stepbrother. He finally saw the baby right before the ceremony when Stacy and Derek came over and introduced him to the boy they had named Derek Jr. "He's a smug little bastard. Why haven't you knocked his teeth out yet, Dad?" Rob asked me as the three of them walked away. "Because he's waiting for that so he can arrest me," I replied. "I'm not falling for that. He can have the whore and their kid." I discovered that Rob was much more interested in revenge than I was. I had no immediate plans to date. I was waiting for the pain of Stacy's betrayal to finally subside. But Rob practically insisted that I dive headfirst into the world of dating and another part of my body. "Don't be pathetic, Dad. You have to show her that she gave up a vital, impressive stud for a pompous asshole. If you can't beat him with your fists, beat him at his own game. And show Mom she picked the wrong man," Rob explained. The more I believed in my son's plan, the more I liked it, even though I knew I needed someone to teach me how to be a womanizing maniac. That meant I had to call one of my old college friends, Spencer Fidrick. Spence was my age. We graduated from college in the same year, but he was still single. If there was a picture next to the word macho man in the dictionary, it would be his photo. He wasn't the most handsome guy in the world, and he wasn't the most athletic. But there was something about Spence that made him irresistible to women. He was practically a legend in high school, and from what I had seen and heard from him since then, not much had changed. He came to visit us once or twice a year, even though he was far from being Stacy's favorite person. She was always afraid he would corrupt me. That didn't happen then, but now... Spence spent a week with me, and I felt like I was back in high school. I took a week off work because I knew I wouldn't be able to keep up with Spence and stay productive at work. That was probably the last smart decision I made that week, other than stocking up on a new box of condoms. After not using condoms for what seemed like forever, I didn't like using them, but I didn't want to risk catching an STD. Spence and I went hunting, his term for it, 4 nights out of the 7 he spent at my place. To say I was educated would be a huge understatement. I discovered that there are many women who are looking for either Mr. Right or Mr. Right for now, although I tried to stay away from married women, even if Spence didn't. The hunt for prey after a quarter-century of marriage and no practice was quite intense and exhausting. By the end of the week, I had a newfound respect for Spence. "Damn, Spence, how do you do it? I'm exhausted, both physically and mentally," I told him as I drove him to the airport at the end of the week. Since Lainey left for college in mid-August, I had been lonely. Spencer arrived the week after she left, so from the end of August, my house suddenly became a refuge for single women, many of whom were quite attractive, if I may say so myself. I didn't try to hide this parade of women from my ex-wife and neighbors, but at least I tried not to be too obvious, no matter how hard I tried. I know that Stacy and Derek witnessed several women coming and going at various times, as did several other neighbors. The neighbors no longer smiled condescendingly at me. Their looks were more envious and surprised. At 48, Stacy was apparently having a hard time getting back into shape after her pregnancy, and I was regularly bringing home beautiful women between the ages of 30 and 60. I wondered what Derek was thinking. His days as a wandering stud certainly seemed to be over, considering he had a partner and a child waiting for him at home. However, I was wrong. Derek had not lost his reputation as a heartbreaker, at least according to two of his female students, who claimed that he had seduced them. One of them was pregnant and claimed that the child was Derek's. The university president was not thrilled with the students' revelations. For years, he had been able to ignore the claims of several women in town, but allegations of sex with students crossed the line. According to the local newspaper, he quickly launched an internal investigation. I learned that Stacy was no happier than the university president. 2 days after the story hit the papers, Stacy and the baby moved away. I was sitting on the porch swing drinking a beer when I saw my ex loading a couple of suitcases into the trunk of her car, putting the baby in the car seat, and driving away. I waved to her as she drove past my house on that beautiful spring day. I wasn't offended when she gave me the middle finger. I knew she wouldn't be struggling financially anytime soon, since she got half of our property in the divorce and I bought her out of my house. She didn't marry Derek, so she won't get anything from him except child support. I found it more than interesting to note that my standing among the women in the neighborhood suddenly rose, and their husbands seemed more than happy to interact with me openly. I wasn't surprised when, about a month later, the day after someone was beaten up, the police came to my house. To be honest, I didn't know about it until the police told me, but given the circumstances, the questioning made perfect sense. They said they would also question the fathers of the two students Derek was involved with, and my former father-in-law. The police quickly realized that I had nothing to do with the attack on Derek, although I probably shouldn't have offered to help pay the bail for the person who did it. I didn't voluntarily tell the police that I would have taken the money from my father-in-law, John Olson. Thanks to Rob and Spence, I experienced a sexual and emotional rebirth I never could have dreamed of. As Spence explained during the week he spent with me, much of the success in the dating world comes from being confident enough to put yourself out there with women of all ages and in different situations. I wouldn't have tried this without the support and guidance of my son and my friend. Despite my rebirth, I decided that I wasn't looking for a woman to replace my ex-wife. I enjoyed getting to know different women, and, to be honest, I made sure to explain this to every woman I went out with more than once. I didn't want any of them to get their hopes up that I was looking for a relationship beyond friendship. Most of the women I dated were fine with that because I was upfront, although a couple mentioned that they weren't going to give up and hoped we would become something more than friends, or sex partners, or whatever we had. Although I decided not to worry too much about the age of my partners, I never chose women who looked like they were in their early 20s. Physically, it would probably have been fun, but what would we talk about after sex? At least with women over 30, we had a better chance of finding common ground, or so I thought. I also had no problem dating women between the ages of 40 and 60. As Spence explained to me, older women may not be as physically active as their younger counterparts, but they usually make up for it with effort, and often have a wealth of experience both in and out of bed. About 2 years after my divorce, I met Sally Darnell, a petite blonde with a curvy figure, whom I guessed to be around 40 when I first saw her at one of my favorite pubs. She appeared to be there with a group of friends in their 30s on a Friday night. After watching them for a while, I concluded that they were a group of co-workers, and Sally was probably their chaperone or mother figure, although she was 20, dressed very similarly to her younger charges, in a tight-fitting blouse with a plunging neckline and a short skirt that only reached the middle of her toned thighs. I was shocked when, on our third date, I learned that Sally was actually 54. She was clearly not wearing a bra under her blouse, which was unbuttoned down to her stomach, and her legs looked amazing in another mid-thigh skirt and 4-inch heels that begged to be sexed. I'm pretty sure I was drooling on her porch when she opened the door to greet me that evening. "Wow," I whispered, not quite realizing I'd actually said it out loud. "I was hoping for something more eloquent, but I can see you're barely conscious right now. If you don't start breathing, you're going to pass out," she said sarcastically. Without heels, Sally was barely 5 feet 1 inch. I discovered that her body was the result of good genes, 3 days a week at the gym, and playing pickleball. "My mom is 20 years older than me, she's 74, and she still gets attention," Sally said. "Wait, you're 54?" I muttered, not believing my ears. She looked concerned for a moment. "Too old?" she asked. "God, no. You're only a few years older than me," I replied. "I just thought you were around 40. "Oh, you're a handsome, silver-tongued devil. But no, at 54, I can't do the splits anymore," she teased. I blushed deeply when she looked at me, wondering how she could have known exactly what I was thinking. She might not have been able to do the splits anymore, but later she showed me that she could still lift her ankles above my shoulders, which only spurred me on physically after I brought her to several orgasms for the first time. After we made love, I wrapped my arms around her and held her close. We kissed passionately and fell asleep in each other's arms. As I drifted off, I remember questioning my decision to live alone. Over the next few weeks, I dated a few other women, and although I had a good time, none of them were as exciting as Sally. On Sunday afternoon, I called her to ask her out for the following Friday night. She declined because she already had a date that evening. "Oh, sorry, I guess I should have called earlier," I muttered, before saying goodbye and hanging up. I don't know why, but I was angry that Sally had a date. After all, we were both single and free, and we had never made any promises to each other. As I sat there thinking about it, I realized that I had become attached to her and was more than a little resentful of whoever was spending time with her instead of me. If that was the case, I'd better get a grip and stop procrastinating. I called her right away and asked her out for Saturday. She giggled and said yes. I had one more request. "Can I reserve you for the foreseeable future?" I asked. I heard her gasp into the phone. It took a few seconds before I heard her whisper, "Yes, I can." Sally and I had talked about our past and our failed marriages on our 3 previous dates, but it had been more in passing. Saturday marked the beginning of a deeper relationship, with deeper explanations and deeper questions. We both seemed eager to tell each other about the things we considered important. And then, of course, there was sex and our connection. Rob had finished college a couple of years ago and settled down out of state, about an hour's drive away. He didn't come home often, and I believed it was because he was angry with me for divorcing his mother. "What's the statute of limitations on assault, Dad?" he asked me once on the phone. Damn, I didn't need sirens to know what he was talking about. The police never found the guy who robbed Derek Strong a few years ago, despite questioning me and several other people, including my ex-father-in-law. "So it was you?" "Way to go, young man," I exclaimed. I knew it wasn't me, but I was absolutely certain that his attack wasn't random. But I'd say you're in the clear for now, as long as you don't brag about it. "And Rob, thank you so much. I'm sure your grandfather would have been grateful too, but I'm not sure it's worth telling him. Derek lost his job at the local university shortly after he was mugged, and apparently the university president had informed his colleagues at other institutions because he ended up at a small college in butt-fuck Wyoming or somewhere like that. Once Rob's legal status was clarified, he began coming home more often. He and Laney got to know Sally well, and both believed in her almost as much as I did. To quote a line from an Indiana Jones movie, "You made a wise choice," Lainey said shortly after meeting Sally. "She's funny, smart, and very beautiful, Dad. I'm sure Mom will be jealous when she sees how beautiful Sally is." Sally and I got married about a year later in a small ceremony. Only my children, her 2 children and their families, my parents, her mother, and Spence Friedrich, were there. Her son walked her down the aisle, and Spence was my best man. Sally was married for 18 years before she caught her husband with his mistress. Even though she had been single for 11 years when we met, she still had a distrust of men. She dated sporadically, but had not been in a serious relationship since her divorce. Because of what I considered to be blatant disrespect from Stacy at the end of our marriage, I tried to have as little contact with her as possible. I didn't participate in joint holidays or birthdays, even though we both lived in the same city. For example, Sally and I would exchange gifts on Christmas Eve so that Stacy and her parents could do so on Christmas morning. Stacy didn't like that. I didn't care. Since I had always gotten along well with Stacy's parents, I felt a little guilty about separating them, but I knew they understood. We discussed inviting them to our place for Christmas, but they both felt it would upset their daughter emotionally. "I know this sounds stupid, Matt, but Stacy would kill me if I told her we were coming to your place for Christmas. I know she treated you wrong, and I'd love to be with you and the kids, but I hope you understand," my father-in-law said. The exception to the rule was my children's weddings. Stacy and I even sat next to each other in the front row during the ceremony, although we hardly spoke to each other. Then Sally and I sat at a table with Sally's children during the reception. I hardly spoke to my ex-wife at either wedding, although she tried to strike up a conversation several times. "Can we at least act like adults?" Stacy asked at the wedding of Lainey, the second of our 2 children to get married. "That didn't work very well when we were married, so no, now that we're not married," I replied. Interestingly, Stacy's son, Derek Jr., took a liking to my Sally and followed her around like a puppy at Lainey's reception. Being a kind person, Sally was friendly to the boy, which seemed to annoy my ex-wife but impressed her parents. I barely noticed the child's existence. I understood that he wasn't to blame, but he was the living embodiment of Stacy's betrayal. Both of my children told me that their little half-brother was a good boy and that they loved him. I understood them completely and told them that I was glad they both got along well with DJ, as everyone called him. Their relationship with him was completely separate from their relationship with me. Although Stacy was not in financial difficulty, she did not live in luxury, as Derek had not paid child support since he left, according to her parents. In addition, a 5-year-old child did not leave her much free time to enjoy me time. She looked 20 pounds heavier and unkempt. In contrast, Sally was glowing. She was in good shape, had her hair and nails done, and as usual, looked and acted at least 10 years younger than her 57 years. Over the past year, Sally and I had been taking dance lessons at her insistence, and I must admit that I believed we looked pretty good on the dance floor. My daughter's new relatives were very impressed with our skills, and we really enjoyed getting to know them. In fact, we got along so well that we even talked about going on vacation with them in the near future. My daughter came up to Sally and me about halfway through the reception, looking serious for the first time all day. "Something wrong, sweetie?" I asked. She looked uncomfortable. Whatever it was, I knew I would fix it if I could. "Listen, Dad, you and Sally threw me an amazing wedding, but I need one small favor," she began. "Mom hasn't danced with anyone all night except Robbie once. She looks miserable. I know you've tried not to talk to her since the divorce, but could you dance with her once or twice? Maybe then everyone will realize that she's not as awful as everyone in our family seems to think she is." Sally and I exchanged glances, then looked at my ex-wife, who did indeed look unhappy. By this point, everyone in our family knew the story of my marriage and divorce, and judging by the fact that no one had spoken to her, I would say they had taken my side. "Dad, Grandma asked me to ask you. She was afraid to ask you herself." I looked at my ex-mother-in-law, who was staring straight at me, her eyes pleading. As I mentioned, I got along well with my in-laws. When I looked at my wife, I saw the same pleading look. Damn it, I couldn't say no to Sally. "It's just a couple of dances, Maddie, please," she begged. "Thanks, Sally," I heard Lainey say as I got up from the table. Stacy was sitting with her back to me when I approached the table where she was sitting with my former in-laws and Derek Jr. She nearly jumped out of her chair when she felt my hand on her shoulder and turned to me. "Matt, what's wrong?" she asked cautiously, knowing that I only spoke to her when something was wrong. "It's nothing, Stacy. I just thought the parents of the bride should dance together at least once. We created this beautiful creature. We should at least celebrate that," I said. Her face instantly changed from concern to joyful. I felt rather than saw the smile on my ex-mother-in-law's face. Stacy wasted no time in taking my outstretched hand, and I led her onto the dance floor as a slow song began to play. She leaned into me without hesitation and rested her head on my chest. It must have been halfway through the song before she spoke. "I need to apologize to you, Matt," she said. "Looking back, I realize I never apologized for hurting you, for being a stupid, stupid woman. I'm not going to apologize for cheating on you. I knew it was wrong, but that didn't stop me at the time. But I never asked for forgiveness for hurting you, even though asking for forgiveness wouldn't have changed anything. I fell for the tricks of an experienced seducer and started believing below the belt. I was stupid and selfish." She tilted her head back to look me in the eyes. I could see that the pain in her eyes was real. It was the first time she had shown any remorse. I tried my best to keep a neutral expression on my face. It took all my self-control not to hit what she called herself. Stupid, stupid woman. To this day, I still can't understand how she could have left me after 22 years. When I didn't answer, she pressed her face against mine. I noticed that my wife and daughter were watching us from the table. "You look very happy with your beautiful new wife," she added. "I've noticed that you two can't keep your hands off each other. I remember when we were like that. I'm glad you found someone you can call your own. When I still lived next door, it seemed like you were in a date of the week club. For a while, I believed you were doing it to make me jealous. You know, I was sitting at home with a child, and you were enjoying the solitude in our town. And unlike Derek, I knew they were all lonely. I knew you were too honest to date someone else's wife. Experience had taught me that someone who chases another man's wife is unlikely to be man of the year. You know the old saying, karma's a bitch? Well, I've discovered that it's true, and her name is Stacy, a dumb bitch at that." "I can't say I'm sorry it didn't work out for you," I said. "To be honest, I was glad your lover turned out to be a jerk." She tilted her head back again to look at me. This time I was smiling. She seemed a little puzzled by that. "Hey, I never said I was perfect. You set me up. I'm glad you got what you deserved," I said. She smiled back at me. "Fair," she said, a little louder than a whisper. The second song ended, and I walked her back to her table. I could see she was disappointed that we weren't staying for a third song. "Have you ever wondered what it would have been like if we had stayed married?" she asked. "Honestly, no," I replied. "My new wife, she's a force of nature." "Yeah, I understand," Stacy said. "Our kids love her, and it seems like everyone just gravitates toward her. Hold on to her, Matt." That last remark hit me hard. I had tried so hard to keep my mouth shut. "I didn't let the last one go. She left on her own," I said quietly, watching her grimace. As any grandparent will tell you, grandchildren are the best. Our 4 children have given us 9 grandchildren. Since they all live within a couple of hours of us, we see them often. Gamma, as all the children call Sally, is a rock star among grandmothers. She is always full of energy, but when she is with her grandchildren, she seems to turn it up a notch. Both of my children call Sally Mom, and I am Dad to Sally's 2 children. The 2 sets of kids get along really well, so when we get together, which is several times a year, it's always a big party. In fact, at Lainey's insistence, we started inviting my ex-mother-in-law and father-in-law, and after some initial awkwardness, they now fit right in with our group. They are both very grateful to Sally and me. I never ask about my ex-wife, and they don't mention her in conversation. At Christmas, Sally always buys a present for Derek Jr. and gives it to my parents to take to him. She signs the card simply, "Love, Matt and Sally." A few years later, a few days before Christmas, as my father-in-law and I were sitting in the living room drinking eggnog, there was a quiet moment. "Mom and I can't thank you and Sally enough for including us in your family life," John said quietly. "Although I can't help but regret that Stacy and DJ can't be here to enjoy this." He saw me frown and hastened to finish his thought. "I'm not suggesting you invite them," he added quickly. "I just regret that my foolish daughter threw it all away because of her selfishness and easily fell under the influence of a man who never loved her the way you do. That's not how we raised her, Matt." "I know it's not your fault, Dad," I replied. "I've never blamed you for her choices.